So maybe it's a good idea that we just kind of like start with the case for Epstein being intelligence, because what I've seen quite recently is a lot of people kind of wiping the record and acting like this is pure conspiracy, that he did have any ties or connections. And I think there's a lot of we have a lot of tidbits of information that we've all kind of collected, and there's this collective conscious that he absolutely is. So, like, what is the argument for it? Maybe give us some backstory. I know you put together something amazing, so just break it down. Who is this Epstein character that we all think we know so well?
I'll start off from the top. I totally understand people who are saying it's a conspiracy theory, and in large part, I think it's because it's been wildly overstated by some people, which is natural in open environment, right? They're like, he's obviously Mossad, he's obviously CIA, this is part of a blackmail ring. And in my opinion, the American people actually have it right. They just don't have the language, the facts, and they need to pull it together. And I want them to have the information that they have to be able to make that case, especially whenever we have the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett just yesterday, who said unequivocally Epstein did not work for Mossad. Now, remember, there are key terms here that matter. Work is not the same as asset or worked with at some time. And this is the master game that these people play, the non-denial denial. It's one of the most classic things in the history of Washington. So let's start at the very, very, very beginning. And I've put together some stuff. That's why I have my laptop here with me. So the first time that we can see any link between Jeffrey Epstein and somebody who would become eventually very important to a story in the intelligence world is in 1974. So 1974, right here in New York City, where we are today, Jeffrey Epstein, despite having no college degree and being a dropout from New York University, is hired by Donald Barr. Now, why does that last name sound familiar? Donald Barr is the father of William Barr, who is the U.S. Attorney General under Donald Trump in 2019, who actually presides over the investigation into the Jeffrey Epstein suicide. I'll just call it a death here for now. So Donald Barr in 1974 hires Jeffrey Epstein at the Dalton School.
Does Donald Barr have intelligence connections himself?
Yes, he certainly does, as would be a surprise to all of you, as do all of the storied families of the people who are connected to the most elite private schools here in New York City. So here we have a New York Times report from 2019. Jeffrey Epstein taught at Dalton. His behavior was noticed. And what they talk about specifically is that Epstein, even here in his early 20s, is already exhibiting the pedophile behavior that he becomes known for. He starts harassing a lot of young girls, and in the span of just 1 year, finds himself basically under investigation and departs under weird circumstances after teaching math here at the Dalton School. So the question is, why did Donald Barr hire Jeffrey Epstein, a person at the Dalton School, to teach math, but despite having no credentials, no college degree? I mean, you can't even get a job at a public school without a college degree and a teacher certification.
Let me ask you
this is the first time we see it.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. And I think it's important to just give pushback so we kind of understand. I don't even want to call it pushback. My dad had a college degree. He walks in and he asks if he can be work in the news station.
Sure.
And so this is back in like the 70s. And he's able to get a job working in the news station. Eventually was on air. So there was a different time. Could teachers just teach at an elite private school?
No, they could not. See,
okay.
That's the thing. So no, they could not. Not common. The Donald Barr, by the way, actually departed the school at the very same time as Jeffrey Epstein. The cope from Donald Barr and others, the explanation is that he very often had an unconventional hiring strategy. But, people who attended Dalton and others basically said it was a very weird hire at the time, and nobody still to this day really has an explanation for why. That's the very first known link, and it's weird. Okay, let's just be honest, it's weird. So from 1974 and 1975, we have the departure. So somewhere around 1976, Jeffrey Epstein meets a guy named Ace Greenberg of Bear Stearns. And of course, you guys know, for the younger audience out there, Bear Stearns is one of the most storied investment banks in Wall Street history. Went down in 2008. So Ace Greenberg, whose child goes to Bear Stearns, meets Jeffrey Epstein. Ostensibly, it's some sort of like parent event. So here we have Jeffrey Epstein's deep ties to top Wall Street figures. And it talks here about Greenberg.
Just so I can understand.
Yeah.
So Jeffrey Epstein was teaching
at Dalton.
Ace Greenberg's kid at Dalton.
Correct.
Builds a relationship with this Ace Greenberg guy, who is one of the heads of the bank?
Yes, he's the head of the bank, one of the most powerful men on all of Wall Street in the 1970s and 1980s.
Got it.
So Ace Greenberg hires Jeffrey Epstein initially on the options desk. What ends up happening is Epstein's actually not very good at that. So they're like, what's this guy any good at? So they transfer him to basically the high net worth money management desk. And effectively, for the next 5 years, Jeffrey Epstein Epstein learns the art and really the art of money laundering. He manages high net worth individuals' money. What he does with that money is he specializes in offshore accounting. And then specifically, what he does is he gets deep in with all of these shadowy figures who are experts in the Cayman Islands and moving money offshores. Now, this is the first known time that he begins to develop the portfolio that will make him very useful for intelligence agencies in the future.
Now, sorry, real quick. Are they moving money offshore to avoid taxes, or
initially it's to avoid taxes? Now, but what we eventually learn is from the formation of something called IAG. So after 5 years at Bear Stearns, Jeffrey Epstein is fired for a regulatory D violation. Basically, he broke internal banking rules and insider trading. So there's two things that we learn here. Number one, he's involved in sketchy behavior from the very beginning. Two, he's not prosecuted. He's basically fired, let go, and everybody keeps it hush hush. I'll come back to that in the future because he develops a strategy there called playing the box. Playing the box is a strategy he admitted to, where he said you can break the law and you can always get away with it because people will be too embarrassed to be able to call you out for it, which will enable you to continue your money laundering.
Why would they be embarrassed?
Because Bear Stearns would be embarrassed by the fact that they have somebody who is managing so much money inside of their bank.
Was he internally caught?
He was internally caught.
So
that's why he was...
So SEC doesn't find out. The Bear Stearns finds out.
Bear Stearns compliance, and they're like, look, we need to make this go away. We don't want to deal with this anymore. He just needs to go. So from that point forward, 1981, Epstein forms a company called IAG, the Intercontinental Assets Group. I'm going to read directly here from the description. He is a, quote, high-level bounty hunter who helps clients recover assets. This is the first entree into what will eventually sprawl as a global intelligence network, because a high-level bounty hunter who helps you recover money is not involved in, quote, legitimate business.
What does that mean, recover money?
Yeah, exactly. So it's in many cases, he eventually gets involved with people who are running Ponzi schemes and basically keeping and hiding money offshore. He sells himself, and it's very unclear because none of the records of this have ever really been released. But the description of high-level bounty hunter indicates to us that his specialization in offshore banking is one that becomes very important to intelligence networks. So this is where people might ask, like, hey, why do we even care about this? Why would an intelligence network even want offshore banking? And the reason why is in the 1980s, there were all of these very sketchy arms deals that were happening. Here we have in the United States, the Iran-Contra affair.
Yeah.
This is the Cold War. And everybody actually has a very distorted attitude as to how the CIA front companies work. Nobody at the CIA has a bank at JP Morgan Chase that says CIA that goes and buys a front company building.
Right.
Did you guys, perfect example. Did everyone watch Argo? Did you guys watch the movie?
Yeah.
So remember how Ben Affleck's character flies to Hollywood and gets a front man to open a company and the money is laundered through the front man? That man would be known as a CIA asset because he's able to open that front company. So that's why it's very important to the CIA.
They don't work for the CIA.
Of course.
They have their own job.
Exactly. They have their own money. In many cases, they put up their own money.
Exactly.
But eventually get reimbursed somewhere in shady offshore banking thing on the back end. So these are vital parts of any intelligence network, Israeli, US, Saudi, everybody.
Because if the CIA's everybody does, then it wouldn't work as espionage.
Exactly.
Because Iran would be like,
you have to be able to hide it.
And then you get Iran-Contra blown up.
That's exactly. This is literally a story
isn't necessarily in and of itself bad.
No,
it's necessary.
It's
for the CIA
it's just
function.
the way that you do business. There's no value judgment here. So the point is that at this time, this is when he begins to develop a relationship in somewhere around between 1976 and 1981 with a man named Douglas Leese. Now, Leese is a very important character. Douglas Leese was a UK national. He's a verified in UK government documents as having been involved in multiple arms deals and is thought to have been at least somewhat of a CIA, MI6, some sort of intelligence asset. Douglas Leese is an expert, again, in offshore banking and international money laundering. At the age of 20, I think it's 28, and somebody can check my work on this, is that at the age of 28, Douglas Leese brings a young Jeffrey Epstein on a private plane to the Pentagon for purposes that we still do not know. This is long before Epstein is a billionaire. This is when he's involved specifically in offshore banking. Leese is basically the conduit through which he is then introduced to all of these very important people. Yes, Adnan Khashoggi, who is a very important person in this story. Stephen Hoffenberg, who is basically the source of a lot of this information. Keep in mind, Stephen Hoffenberg, and he went on the record to Vicky Ward, who's the journalist who did the original expose on Epstein in 2002. He was convicted of one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. What ended up happening is he was trying to con Epstein, but Epstein Epstein actually conned him out of $100 million. But he, Stephen Hoffenberg, basically showed the relationship between Douglas Leese and Epstein, which Epstein got very testy about whenever he was asked, basically pretended, I hardly know the guy. Leese is the person who introduces Epstein to Hoffenberg, to Robert Maxwell, and to this Adnan Khashoggi. Now, the reason why all three of those names matter is that Hoffenberg shows the conduit of the way that Epstein was already working with illegal enterprises and offshore banking. The way that he alleges Epstein stole his money was specifically through one of these offshore transactions. The other two names
So a guy was running a Ponzi scheme.
And then he
got
conned him.
caught.
Yeah.
And then wrote a hater article about it.
And actually Epstein cooperated with U.S. authorities against Hoffenberg and basically got him locked up in prison. This was only acknowledged years and years later. I mean, he was a master networker. We have to give it to him.